I need you to understand something before I tell you the story. When someone you've loved for 23 years decides to humiliate you in front of your entire family, in front of your children, in front of people who've known you since you were young and hopeful and believed in forever, when they orchestrate that kind of cruelty with precision and forethought, they don't just break your heart. They hand you something far more valuable. They hand you clarity. And with clarity comes power. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world where you've ever been betrayed, ever been blindsided, ever been made to feel small by someone who promised to make you feel safe, leave a comment and let me know where you're from. Because this story, my story, it's happening everywhere. And maybe hearing mine will help you navigate yours. My name is Claire. I'm 46 years old, and 3 months ago, my husband Marcus had his affair partner deliver divorce papers to me at our annual family Thanksgiving gathering, in front of 43 people. While I was carving the turkey I'd brined for 2 days, while our daughter Sophia was setting out the cranberry sauce she'd made from scratch, the recipe I taught her when she was 12, while our son Daniel was laughing with his cousins in the living room, completely unaware that his father had planned to detonate our family in the next 60 seconds. But here's what Marcus didn't know. Here's what his girlfriend Vanessa, all 29 years of her, didn't know when she walked into my dining room with that manila envelope and that practiced look of sympathetic concern. I knew it was coming. Not the exact moment, not the specific cruelty of the method, but I knew something was coming. And I'd spent 6 weeks preparing for it. Before I tell you what I did, before I tell you about the envelope I handed them in return, I need you to understand how I got there. Because revenge isn't just about the moment of impact. It's about everything that builds to it. It's about every sleepless night, every piece of evidence gathered, every conversation overheard, every lie cataloged. Revenge is a structure you build brick by brick while pretending everything is fine. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real stories about real people who fought back against betrayal and injustice, check the description box below. Because the truth is, we're not alone in this. We just think we are. It started 6 months before Thanksgiving. Marcus had been working late. Not every night, but enough nights that the pattern became noticeable. He was a senior partner at a corporate law firm in downtown Chicago. We lived in Evanston, about 40 minutes north, and late nights weren't unusual in his world. But these late nights felt different. They had a texture to them, a quality I couldn't name but could feel in my body the way you feel a storm coming before the sky changes. He'd come home smelling like expensive hotel soap. Not his cologne, not the bergamot and cedar scent I'd been smelling on his skin for 2 decades. Hotel soap, the generic kind that comes in those little wrapped bars, the kind that smells like nothing and everything at once, like temporary things and people passing through. I didn't confront him. Not then. Instead, I started watching. I started noticing. The way he'd angle his phone away from me when he typed. The way he'd delete his browser history every night. I checked his laptop when he showered, saw the gaps, the missing hours. The way he'd started going to the gym at 5 in the morning, coming back with wet hair but barely sweating, his gym bag smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. I became a detective in my own home. I hated it. I hated who I was becoming, this suspicious, vigilant woman who checked receipts and scrolled through credit card statements at 2 in the morning while Marcus slept the sleep of someone who'd compartmentalized his guilt into something manageable. But I couldn't stop. Because some part of me knew that if I didn't gather the evidence now, if I didn't build my case while I still had access, I'd lose everything when the truth finally surfaced. My sister Rachel called one Wednesday in September. She worked in marketing at a firm 2 buildings down from Marcus's office. She'd seen him at a wine bar on Randolph Street, the kind of place with dim lighting and small plates and tables positioned for intimacy. He was with a woman. Young. Blonde. They were holding hands across the table. Rachel's voice on the phone was careful, measured. She knew what she was telling me. She knew she was confirming what I'd already suspected but hadn't wanted to name. "Claire," she said, and I could hear her choosing each word like she was defusing a bomb. "I saw Marcus today. He wasn't alone. I remember standing in our kitchen, the kitchen I'd renovated 3 years ago, picking out every tile and cabinet pull and paint color because Marcus said he didn't care about that stuff, said I had better taste, and feeling the floor shift beneath me. Not metaphorically. Actually shift, like the earth had moved 1 inch to the left, and I was the only one who noticed. "Describe her," I said. My voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes from shock, from your body's emergency protocols kicking in. Rachel described Vanessa. Though she didn't know her name then, didn't know that this woman was a junior associate at Marcus's firm, didn't know that Marcus had been mentoring her for 8 months, didn't know that mentoring had evolved into something else entirely sometime around June. I thanked Rachel. I told her I'd handle it. I told her not to tell anyone else in the family, not yet, because I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out what handling it actually meant. That night, I did something I'd never done in 23 years of marriage. I went through Marcus's phone while he slept. I knew his passcode. He'd never hidden it from me, another small cruelty of his confidence. And I sat on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m, the cold towel pressing against my legs, and I read everything. The texts were worse than I'd imagined. Not because they were explicit, though some were, but because they were tender. Because Marcus wrote to Vanessa the way he used to write to me when we were young, when we were new, when love felt like discovery instead of maintenance. He called her V. He sent her poems. Poems. Marcus, who told me 5 years ago that he didn't have the emotional bandwidth for romance anymore, that we were past that phase, that mature love was about partnership and stability, not grand gestures. I took screenshots. Hundreds of them. I emailed them to a private account Marcus didn't know about. I documented dates, times, locations. I found restaurant receipts, hotel bookings, purchases for jewelry I'd never received. I found it all because he'd stopped being careful. Or maybe he'd never been careful. Maybe he thought I was too busy, too trusting, too invested in maintaining our perfect suburban life to notice. But I noticed everything. I always had. That was my curse, and as it would turn out, my weapon. By October, I knew he was going to leave me. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, or didn't look at me. In the way he'd stopped arguing about small things, stopped caring if I loaded the dishwasher wrong, or forgot to pick up his dry cleaning. He'd already left, emotionally. His body was just waiting for the right moment to follow. So I started preparing. I met with Patricia Gonzalez, the best divorce attorney in Illinois, someone who'd handled high-profile cases with the kind of ruthless precision I needed. I documented everything. Every asset, every account, every investment property, every trust fund Marcus thought I didn't know about. I gathered 23 years of financial records. I prepared statements from friends, from colleagues, from Rachel who'd witnessed the affair. I built a case so airtight that Marcus's lawyers would have nothing to work with except surrender. But I didn't file anything. Not yet. I needed to wait. I needed to see what he would do. Because I knew Marcus. I knew his ego, his need for control, his desire to manage the narrative. And I knew that whatever he planned would be big, would be designed to make me look weak, to make him look like the reasonable one who'd finally had enough of his difficult wife. I just didn't know how big. How cruel. How calculated. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, Marcus came home early. He sat me down in the living room, the formal one we only used for important conversations or when we had company, and he told me he needed space. He said he wasn't happy. He said we'd grown apart. He said all the clichés people say when they're leaving but don't want to be the villain of their own story. He didn't mention Vanessa. Not once. That omission told me everything. I think we should separate after the holidays, he said, his voice so reasonable, so measured. For the kids. Let's give them one more normal Thanksgiving, one more normal Christmas. Then in January, we'll sit down and have the hard conversations. I looked at him. This man I'd loved since I was 23. This man whose children I'd carried and birthed and raised. This man who'd held my hand through my mother's funeral and my father's stroke. This man who was sitting in my living room, planning our family's destruction with the same careful strategy he used for corporate mergers. And I smiled. That sounds reasonable, I said. One more normal holiday. For the kids. He looked relieved. Actually relieved. He thought I was going to make it easy for him. He had no idea what was coming. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and bright. The kind of November day in Chicago where the sun is sharp but gives no warmth, where the air bites at your face and makes everything feel more vivid, more real. I'd been awake since 4, preparing the turkey, making pies, setting the table with the good china we'd received as wedding gifts from people who probably assumed we'd make it. Sophia came downstairs around 7, still in her pajamas, her dark hair, my hair, pulled into a messy bun. She was 21, home from Northwestern for the holiday, studying environmental law. So earnest and brilliant and completely unaware that her father was about to shatter everything she thought she knew about our family. "Mom, you're up early," she said, kissing my cheek. She smelled like the lavender lotion she'd been using since high school. "Need help with anything?" I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to pull her aside and warn her, prepare her, give her some kind of emotional armor for what was coming. But I couldn't, because I didn't know what was coming, not exactly. I just knew something was. Marcus had been too cheerful the past few days, too engaged, too present. Like someone about to close a business deal. "Just keep me company," I said. "Tell me about school." She did. She talked about her classes, her professors, a boy named Tyler who'd asked her out. Normal things. Daughter things. And I listened and responded and kept basting the turkey, all while my hand shook slightly and my mind ran through scenarios, possibilities, contingencies. Daniel arrived around 9 with his girlfriend Emma. He was 19, studying engineering at University of Michigan, so much like his father in some ways. Analytical, methodical, careful with his words, but with a kindness Marcus had lost somewhere along the way. He hugged me tight, the way he'd been doing since he was small, like he was trying to transfer some of his strength into me. "Dad here?" he asked, glancing around. "Picking up some last-minute things," I lied. Marcus had left an hour ago, saying he needed to get wine and flowers. But I'd seen him checking his phone obsessively before he left, texting someone, and I knew the errands were an excuse. He was coordinating something. The family started arriving around noon. My sister Rachel and her husband Tom. My brother Kevin with his wife and 3 kids. Marcus's parents, Robert and Patricia, who'd always been kind to me in that distant, formal way that wealthy New England families practice kindness, like a skill they'd learned but never fully internalized. Marcus's sister Jennifer with her partner and their adopted son. Cousins, aunts, uncles. The house filled with noise and warmth and the smell of roasting meat and pie and that particular chaos that only large family gatherings create. Everyone brought something. Rachel brought her famous sweet potato casserole. Kevin brought beer and stories about his construction business. Marcus's mother brought judgment and unsolicited advice about my tablecloth choice. Normal. Everything was so devastatingly normal. Marcus arrived at 1 o'clock. Without wine or flowers. With Vanessa. I saw them through the front window, him parking his BMW at the curb instead of in the driveway, like he wanted to maintain an easy exit. Her stepping out of the passenger side, her blonde hair catching the November sun, wearing a cream-colored dress that was far too formal for a family Thanksgiving, holding a manila envelope against her chest like a shield. My heart didn't race. It stopped. Completely stopped for 1, 2, 3 seconds, and then restarted with a rhythm that felt different, stronger, like my body had rebooted into some kind of survival mode I didn't know I had. Rachel saw my face. She followed my gaze to the window. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Claire, is that?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Don't say anything." "Not yet." Marcus opened the front door. The conversation in the living room didn't stop. Why would it? People were expecting him. He was the host. His arrival was normal. But then Vanessa stepped in behind him, and the room went quiet. Not immediately. It took a few seconds for people to notice, to process, to understand that this young woman in the expensive dress was not a colleague dropping off documents, was not a friendly neighbor, was something else entirely. "Everyone," Marcus said, his voice carrying that false heartiness of someone about to deliver bad news disguised as good news. "This is Vanessa. She's a colleague from the firm. She's going to be joining us today." The silence was complete now. 43 people, including children, just staring. I could see the confusion on faces. On Sophia's face, on Daniel's, on Marcus's parents' faces. They didn't understand yet, but they would. I walked out from the kitchen, wiping my hands on my apron, the blue one with the white flowers that Sophia had given me for Mother's Day 3 years ago, and I smiled. Actually smiled. "Vanessa," I said warmly, extending my hand. "How lovely to meet you. Marcus has mentioned you." That was a lie. Marcus had never mentioned her. But saying it out loud, in front of everyone, established something. It said I knew. It said I'd known. It took away his element of surprise. Vanessa's hand was cold and damp when she shook mine. She looked nervous. Good. She should be. Claire, she said, and her voice was softer than I'd expected, younger, with a slight Texas accent she'd probably tried to train out of herself in law school. Thank you for having me, Marcus said. Why don't you come in? I interrupted gently, gesturing to the living room. We're just about to sit down for dinner. But Vanessa didn't move toward the living room. Instead, she looked at Marcus. He nodded, just slightly, and she reached into her designer purse, Gucci I noticed, probably a gift from my husband, and pulled out the manila envelope she'd been holding in the car. Actually, Vanessa said, and I had to give her credit, her voice only shook a little. I'm here because Marcus asked me to deliver something to you. We thought it would be better to do this with family around. For support. The room somehow got quieter. I didn't think that was possible, but it did. Even the children stopped fidgeting. Claire, Marcus said, stepping forward, his lawyer voice activating, the one he used in depositions. I think we should talk privately. No, I said, still smiling. If you've ever been in a moment where you knew your life was about to explode, where you knew everyone was watching, waiting to see if you'd break, you know exactly how I felt. You know that strange calm that descends, that clarity. If Vanessa came here to deliver something in front of my family, then we'll handle it in front of my family. That's what you wanted, isn't it, Marcus? Witnesses. I took the envelope from Vanessa's hand. Our fingers touched briefly. Hers were trembling. Mine weren't. Not anymore. I opened it slowly, deliberately. Inside were divorce papers. Professionally prepared. Legally precise, with post-it notes marking where I needed to sign. Tabs highlighting the important sections. The custody arrangements Marcus wanted, the division of assets he decided was fair, the timeline he'd unilaterally established. I read through the first page, then the second. I was aware of everyone watching me. Sophia had started crying. I could hear her soft sobs from across the room. Daniel had stood up, his face red, his hands clenched. Rachel was frozen, her mouth open. Marcus's parents looked appalled, but I couldn't tell if they were appalled at their son or at me. Claire, Marcus said again, taking a step toward me. I know this is difficult, but... Difficult! I looked up at him. You had your affair partner deliver divorce papers to me on Thanksgiving, in front of our children, in front of your parents, in front of 43 people who came here expecting a family meal. And you think the word difficult covers it. My voice wasn't loud. I wasn't yelling. That was important. I needed to be the reasonable one, the calm one, the one who had every right to lose her mind but wasn't losing it. I'm sorry about the timing, Marcus said, and he actually sounded sincere. That was the worst part. He believed himself. But you haven't been happy either, Claire. We both know this marriage has been over for a while. I'm just making it official. Making it official, I repeated. I looked at Vanessa. She wouldn't meet my eyes. How long have you two been sleeping together? That's not, Marcus started. 8 months, Vanessa said quietly. I'm sorry. We didn't mean for it to happen. They never do, I said. I looked back down at the divorce papers, at Marcus's terms, at the life he decided I deserved without consulting me. And then I looked back up at him. At them. At everyone. I actually need to get something from upstairs. Would you all mind waiting here? This will just take a moment. I walked out of the room. Up the stairs. Into my bedroom. The one I'd shared with Marcus for 20 years. The one where we conceived both our children. The one where he'd stopped touching me sometime around year 15 without explanation. I went to my dresser, opened the bottom drawer where I kept old sweaters I never wore, and pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying around for 3 weeks. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I felt nothing and everything at once. Rage, satisfaction, grief, power. I felt like someone who'd been walking toward this moment for months and had finally arrived. When I came back downstairs, everyone was exactly where I'd left them. Frozen. Waiting. The turkey was probably drying out in the oven. The mashed potatoes were getting cold. Nobody cared. I walked straight to Marcus and Vanessa. I held out my envelope, identical to theirs, manila, professional, heavy with the weight of documentation. Since we're doing this in public, I said, my voice steady, clear, loud enough for everyone to hear, I think it's only fair that I respond in kind. Marcus took the envelope. His confidence faltered for just a second. I saw it in his eyes. The flicker of uncertainty, the first hint that maybe this wasn't going the way he'd planned. He opened it, started reading, and I watched his face change from confident to confused to pale to horrified in the span of 30 seconds. Marcus's hands were shaking. Actually shaking. I'd never seen that before. In 23 years, I'd never seen him lose his composure, not once. He was always controlled, always 3 steps ahead, always the smartest person in the room. But right now, standing in our living room with 43 witnesses, reading the documents I just handed him, he looked like a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse in real time. "What is this?" His voice was barely audible. He looked up at me, and for the first time since I discovered the affair, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Claire, what?" "It's exactly what it looks like," I said calmly. "You wanted a divorce. I'm giving you one. But on my terms, not yours." I turned to face the room. Everyone was staring. Sophia was still crying, but she'd stopped looking devastated and started looking confused. Daniel had his arm around her, his face hard. Rachel had her hand over her mouth. Marcus's mother looked like she might faint. "I'm sorry to do this during Thanksgiving," I said, addressing the room. "I'm sorry you all had to come here expecting a family gathering and got this instead. But since Marcus decided to make our divorce a public spectacle, I figured I should give you all the full picture." I gestured to the envelope in Marcus's hands. 3 months ago, I discovered that my husband was having an affair with a junior associate at his firm. For 8 months, he'd been lying to me, to our children, to all of you. Telling me he was working late. Telling me he loved me. Planning our future while actively dismantling it with someone else. Vanessa made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. But I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Marcus. When I found out, I continued. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I hired the best divorce attorney in Illinois. I documented everything. Every hotel receipt, every dinner, every gift purchased on credit cards I didn't know existed. Every text message, every email, every photograph. I documented his assets, the ones he told me about and the ones he didn't. Marcus's face had gone from pale to gray. "Claire!" "I found the offshore accounts, Marcus. The ones in the Cayman Islands that you set up 6 years ago. The real estate investments you made under shell companies. The trust funds you established for yourself without my knowledge, using marital assets. All of it." The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Could hear someone's phone buzzing in another room. Could hear my own heartbeat, steady and strong. "In Illinois," I said, still speaking to everyone, still making sure every witness heard every word, "we have equitable distribution laws, which means when a marriage dissolves, assets are divided fairly based on each spouse's contribution. And I've contributed everything. 23 years of marriage. 2 children raised primarily by me while Marcus built his career. My own career sacrificed so his could flourish. Every dinner party hosted for his colleagues. Every client wined and dined. Every move made to advance his position." I finally looked at Vanessa. She was crying now, mascara running, that expensive dress somehow looking less elegant under the weight of realization. "And then there's the matter of adultery," I said. "Illinois is technically a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still impact financial settlements, especially when it involves someone in a workplace power dynamic. When a senior partner mentors a junior associate, pays for her rent, her car, her credit cards, all while married, that creates some very interesting legal questions about asset dissipation and breach of fiduciary duty." Marcus found his voice. "You can't prove any of that." "I can prove all of it," I said. "Every penny you spend on her. Every hotel room. Every restaurant. I have bank statements, credit card records, witness testimony from the hotels where you stayed together, text messages where you discussed finances. Everything." I turned back to the room. "The envelope I just gave Marcus contains divorce papers that my attorney filed this morning. Papers that outline exactly what I'm entitled to, which is 50% of everything, including the assets he tried to hide. Papers that include evidence of adultery and financial misconduct. Papers that request primary custody of our children, given that Marcus has demonstrated a pattern of deception and prioritized his affair over his family responsibilities. Sophia stood up. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady. "Dad, is this true?" "All of it." Marcus looked at his daughter, then at his son, then at his parents, then back at me, and I saw something shift in his eyes. Not acceptance. Calculation. He was already working the angles, already trying to figure out how to spin this, how to minimize damage, how to negotiate. "We can talk about this privately," he said to me, ignoring Sophia's question. "We don't need to involve everyone." "You involved everyone," I interrupted. "You made that choice when you had your girlfriend deliver divorce papers during a family holiday. You wanted an audience. You've got one." Marcus's father stood up. Robert was 78, a retired federal judge, the kind of man who commanded respect through presence alone. "Marcus," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed, "is what Claire is saying true? Did you establish offshore accounts? Did you use marital assets to fund an affair?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. That told his father everything. "Jesus Christ," Robert said, sitting back down heavily. "You're a lawyer. You know better than this." "It's not," Marcus started. "It's not what?" his mother said sharply. Patricia had been quiet until now, but her voice cut through the room like a blade. "Not adultery? Not financial fraud? Not a complete betrayal of your family? Which part isn't true, Marcus?" I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the text I'd read, the ones where he'd told Vanessa that I was cold, that I'd let myself go, that he'd been unhappy for years but stayed for the kids. The ones where he'd laughed about how clueless I was, how easy it was to hide things from me. And my sympathy evaporated. "The papers you gave me," I said to Marcus, pulling everyone's attention back to the center of the room, requested that we split custody 50-50. That I take 40% of our marital assets. That I waive any claim to your pension, your retirement accounts, your partnership interest in the firm. That's what you thought was fair. I let that sink in. Let everyone understand what he tried to do. My papers request primary custody with generous visitation for you. 50% of everything, including what you tried to hide. Spousal support calculated based on the standard of living I've maintained for 23 years. And full financial disclosure of all assets, accounts, and investments within 30 days, with penalties for noncompliance. Marcus's lawyer voice finally activated fully. "You can request whatever you want, Claire. That doesn't mean you'll get it." "I'll get most of it," I said, "because I have evidence of adultery and financial misconduct. Because I have a paper trail that shows you violated your fiduciary duty to our marriage. Because I have the best divorce attorney in the state, and you've handed her a gift-wrapped case." I paused, making sure he understood, making sure everyone understood. "But more importantly, I'll get it because I spent 23 years building a life with you, sacrificing for you, supporting you, loving you. And you repaid that by planning to humiliate me in front of our family. By trying to manipulate the divorce in your favor before I even knew it was happening. By bringing your mistress to our home on Thanksgiving." The word mistress made Vanessa flinch. She'd been standing silent and still, like maybe if she didn't move, everyone would forget she was there. But I wasn't going to let her disappear. "Vanessa," I said, turning to face her directly. "How old are you?" She hesitated. 29. 29, I repeated. "I have shoes older than you. I have a marriage, had a marriage, that lasted longer than you've been alive. And you knew Marcus was married when you started sleeping with him." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't. I know it doesn't make it better. But I'm sorry." "You're sorry," I said. Not a question, just acknowledgement. "Do you love him?" That surprised her. Surprised Marcus, too. He took a step toward me, but I held up my hand. "Do you love him?" I asked again. "Yes," Vanessa whispered. "I do." "Then you should know what you're getting," I said. "You're getting a man who will lie to you, who will hide money from you, who will tell you he loves you while planning his exit strategy. You're getting a man who treats relationships like business transactions, strategic, calculated, disposable when they no longer serve his interests." I looked back at Marcus. "And Marcus, you're getting exactly what you deserve. A relationship built on deception. A reputation that will follow you professionally. Children who will struggle to trust you. Parents who are ashamed of you. And a divorce settlement that will cost you far more than if you'd just been honest in the first place. The turkey timer went off in the kitchen. The absurdity of it, this domestic sound interrupting this family implosion, would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. I think, I said quietly, you should both leave now. I'll have my attorney contact yours to arrange the discovery process and mediation schedule. But you need to leave my house. Marcus didn't move. He was still holding my envelope, still processing, still trying to find an angle. Now, Marcus, his father said, take Vanessa and leave. You've done enough damage today. They left. Marcus first, moving mechanically, his face blank. Vanessa following, stumbling slightly in her expensive heels, that cream dress now seeming ridiculous, costume-like, a visual reminder of her role in this disaster. The door closed behind them. The BMW started outside, drove away, and then, only then, did I let myself feel it. The weight of what I'd just done. The enormity of what had just happened. The knowledge that I'd just publicly destroyed the father of my children, the man I'd loved for most of my adult life, in front of 43 witnesses, including those same children. My legs gave out. Rachel caught me, and I started crying, not the quiet, composed crying I'd been doing for months in private, but the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and animal and uncontrollable. 3 months later, I'm sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee at 6 a.m, watching the sun come up over Lake Michigan. The house is quiet. Too quiet, maybe. Sophia is back at Northwestern. Daniel is back in Michigan. The space they leave behind feels bigger than it should, like absence's physical weight. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks ago. Patricia Gonzalez was as good as her reputation promised. We settled out of court. Marcus's attorneys strongly advised against going to trial, given the evidence, and I got most of what I asked for. 52% of our assets, actually, once we accounted for the money he'd spent on Vanessa and the attempts to hide funds. Primary custody, though the kids are old enough that custody mostly means who they call first when they need something. Spousal support for 5 years. The house, the cars, the college funds he tried to redirect. Marcus moved to a downtown condo. Vanessa moved in with him 6 weeks after Thanksgiving. I heard through Rachel, who heard through a colleague, that his partnership at the firm has been under review. Apparently, the managing partners don't love that one of their senior attorneys was conducting an affair with a junior associate, spending firm resources on personal matters, and creating potential liability issues. He's not fired, but he's been sidelined. Important cases going to other partners. His name removed from the letterhead. The professional consequences he probably didn't anticipate when he was planning his romantic exit. Sophia comes home most weekends. We talk more now than we did before. Not about the divorce specifically, but about everything else. She tells me about her classes, her friends. Tyler, who did ask her out and turned out to be kind and funny and nothing like her father. She tells me she's angry at Marcus, that she can't look at him without seeing that day, seeing Vanessa standing in our living room with divorce papers, seeing his face when he realized I'd outmaneuvered him. Do you think you'll ever forgive him? She asked me last weekend. We were making dinner together, something we'd started doing, this ritual of chopping vegetables and sharing space, and slowly rebuilding our relationship into something that didn't have Marcus's shadow over it. I thought about her question for a long time. I don't know, I finally said. Maybe forgiveness isn't the goal. Maybe the goal is just moving forward, building something new. Daniel is angrier. He hasn't spoken to Marcus since Thanksgiving. Won't return his calls, won't meet him for dinner, won't engage. I've tried to encourage him to work through his feelings, to not let anger poison him the way it could poison me if I let it. But he's 19, and at 19, betrayal feels absolute. He'll figure it out eventually. Or he won't. That's not something I can control. Marcus's parents reached out to me a month after Thanksgiving. They took me to lunch, Robert and Patricia, sitting across from me at a restaurant downtown, looking older than I remembered, looking tired. We're sorry, Patricia said. For Marcus. For not seeing what he was doing. For how this happened. Robert was more direct. We raised him better than this. I thought we raised him better than this. I didn't tell them it wasn't their fault. Because in some ways, Maybe it was. Maybe the emphasis on success, on achievement, on appearances, on maintaining the family reputation. Maybe that contributed to Marcus becoming someone who saw relationships as transactions, who valued winning over connection. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I appreciate you saying that, I told them. And I want you to know, you're still Sophia and Daniel's grandparents. This doesn't change that. You're welcome in my home anytime. Patricia cried. Actually cried. This controlled New England woman who'd never shown emotion in my presence, crying in a restaurant because her son had destroyed his family and she didn't know how to fix it. The hardest part hasn't been the divorce itself. It's been the loneliness. 23 years of partnership, even bad partnership, even partnership that was failing, leaves a void. I wake up sometimes and reach for someone who isn't there. I cook dinner and automatically make too much food. I watch TV and find myself starting to comment on something to a person who isn't sitting next to me anymore. Rachel says I should date. You're 46, not dead, she told me last week over wine at her place. You're beautiful, you're smart, you're financially stable now. Men would line up, but I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. Maybe I'll be one of those women who has one great love or one great betrayal, and that's it. The end of that chapter. And maybe that's okay. I've started painting again. Something I used to do in college, before Marcus, before marriage, before I became someone whose identity was entirely wrapped up in being a wife and mother. I'm not good at it. My landscapes look like a child's interpretation of nature. But it doesn't matter. It's mine. This thing I do in the early morning hours, standing in front of a canvas in the spare bedroom I've converted into a studio, making something that doesn't have to be anything except what I want it to be. I've also started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. Every Thursday evening, I go and help with legal advocacy, connecting women who are leaving abusive relationships with attorneys, helping them understand their rights, walking them through the process I just walk through myself. It's brutal work. These women have stories that make mine look like a fairy tale. But it's also healing, helping someone else navigate their escape, their revenge, their rebuilding. It gives my experience purpose. If you've stuck with me through this whole story, if you've listened to every painful detail of how my marriage ended and how I fought back, thank you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from and if this resonated with you. Because the truth is, betrayal is universal. The specifics change, but the pain, the anger, the slow process of putting yourself back together, that's the same everywhere. And check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about people who refused to be victims, who fought back, who rebuilt. Because we're not alone in this. We just feel like we are sometimes. I saw Vanessa 3 weeks ago. She was at Whole Foods, buying organic vegetables and expensive cheese, looking tired in that way that people look when reality doesn't match their fantasy. I could have walked away, could have avoided her, but I didn't. Vanessa, I said, walking up to her in the produce section. She looked up, startled. Fear flashed across her face. Actual fear, like I might cause a scene, might attack her, might do something dramatic. But I wasn't going to. The time for drama was over. How are you? I asked, and I meant it. Not sarcastically. Not cruelly. I genuinely wanted to know. She looked confused. I'm okay. We're okay. Marcus and I. Good, I said. And I meant that too. She studied my face, trying to understand. You don't hate me? I thought about that. Did I hate her? 3 months ago, the answer would have been yes. Absolutely, unquestionably yes. But standing there in Whole Foods, looking at this young woman who'd been part of destroying my marriage, but who was also just a person making terrible choices, I found I didn't have the energy for hate anymore. I hated what you did, I said carefully. I hated that you knew Marcus was married and slept with him anyway. I hated that you walked into my home on Thanksgiving and participated in humiliating me. But hate you? No, I don't hate you. I actually feel sorry for you. Sorry for me? She looked offended. You're 29, I said. You're building a relationship with a man who's proven he'll lie and cheat and hide money. You think you're special, that he won't do to you what he did to me. But he will. Maybe not today. Maybe not for years. But eventually, when the newness wears off and you become familiar and another young associate starts at his firm, he'll do it again. Because that's who he is. Vanessa's face changed. Not immediately, but slowly, like she was processing something she'd been trying not to think about. He talks about you sometimes, she said quietly. When he's had too much to drink. He talks about the early years. About how different things were. Everything is different in the early years, I said. That's not special. That's just how time works. We stood there for a moment. Two women connected by one man's selfishness, both damaged in different ways. I hope it works out for you, I said finally. I genuinely do. But if it doesn't, if you find yourself in my position someday, with evidence you need to gather and plans you need to make, you have my number. Rachel can give it to you. I walked away before she could respond. I didn't need to know what she thought about my offer. It was enough that I'd made it. Because despite everything, despite the affair and the betrayal and the public humiliation, I understood something now that I hadn't understood on Thanksgiving. We're all just trying to survive our choices. Some of us make better ones than others. But we're all doing our best with what we know at the time. Marcus tried to call me 2 months after the divorce was finalized. I let it go to voicemail. He said he wanted to apologize. Said he'd been thinking about what happened, about his choices, about how badly he'd handled everything. Said he understood if I never wanted to speak to him again, but he hoped someday I could forgive him. I listened to the voicemail 3 times, trying to hear genuine remorse, trying to hear the man I'd married, the one who'd held me on our wedding day and promised forever. But all I heard was a man who'd lost more than he'd anticipated and was trying to manage his guilt. I didn't call him back. Some things don't need a response. Some apologies don't need to be accepted. Some relationships end without reconciliation, without closure, without that final conversation where everyone gets to say their piece and move on feeling resolved. Real life isn't like the movies. Sometimes people just break each other and then exist in separate spaces, carrying the weight of what they did and what was done to them. I'm learning to be okay with that. Last week, I had coffee with Patricia Gonzalez, my attorney. We met at a cafe near her office, and I thanked her again for everything she'd done. She'd taken my case when I was scared and angry and overwhelmed, and she'd guided me through the legal maze with precision and compassion. You did the hard part, she told me. I just filed the paperwork. You gathered evidence, made difficult choices, kept yourself together when most people would have fallen apart. That was all you. I don't feel together, I admitted. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding on. That's normal, she said. Divorce is a kind of death. You're grieving the loss of a future you thought you'd have. That doesn't happen quickly. She was right. I am grieving. Not for Marcus. I don't miss him, not really. But for the life I thought we were building. For the couple I thought we were. For the belief that love, once established, could weather anything. I'm grieving my own naivety, my trust, my willingness to overlook small signs because I wanted to believe in forever. But I'm also discovering who I am without him. Without the identity of Marcus's wife. Without the role I've been playing for 23 years. And that person, she's interesting. She's stronger than I thought. She's more resilient. She's capable of surviving things she didn't think she could survive. She's me. Just me. And that's enough. Yesterday, Sophia asked me if I regretted how I handled Thanksgiving. If I wished I'd done it differently, more privately, less dramatically. No, I told her honestly. Marcus chose the battlefield. He chose to make our divorce public, to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. I just chose to fight back on his terms. And I won. Do you feel like you won? She asked. Really? I thought about that. About what winning means when your marriage ends. About whether there are actually winners in divorce, or just different degrees of losing. I feel like I survived, I said finally. And I feel like I maintained my dignity while doing it. Marcus wanted me to fall apart, to be the difficult ex-wife, to confirm whatever narrative he'd been telling himself and Vanessa about why our marriage failed. I didn't give in that. I fought smart. I fought with evidence and strategy and the support of people who loved me. And now I'm rebuilding. So yes, I think I won. The sun is higher now. The kitchen is filled with light. In a few hours, I have lunch plans with Rachel and then a painting class I signed up for at the community center. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with a financial advisor to discuss investments and retirement planning, things Marcus always handled, things I'm learning to do myself now. Next week, Daniel is coming home for spring break and bringing Emma, and we're going to try to have a normal family dinner without the ghost of Marcus hanging over everything. My life is different now. Smaller in some ways. I'm not hosting dinner parties for Marcus's colleagues anymore, not maintaining appearances, not performing the role of successful attorney's wife. But it's bigger in other ways too. It's mine. Every choice, every plan, every decision, it belongs to me now. And that's the real revenge, I think. Not the divorce settlement or the public confrontation or the evidence I gathered. The real revenge is building a life that doesn't need Marcus in it. That doesn't revolve around his choices, his career, his happiness. The real revenge is discovering that I'm enough, all by myself. 3 months ago, Marcus handed me divorce papers in front of 43 people and expected me to fall apart. Instead, I handed him back a mirror. I showed him exactly who he was and what his choices had cost him. I showed him that I was smarter than he thought, stronger than he assumed, more prepared than he could have imagined. But more importantly, I showed myself the same things. If you're going through something similar, if you're in the middle of betrayal or divorce or rebuilding after someone you love destroyed what you built together, I want you to know it's possible to survive it. It's possible to fight back without losing yourself. It's possible to be devastated and strategic at the same time. It's possible to grieve and plan, to hurt and heal, to fall apart and put yourself back together into something new. You're stronger than you think. You're more resilient than you know. And you deserve better than someone who treats your love like a transaction, your trust like something disposable. I'm still figuring out who I am post-Marcus. Still learning how to be single at 46. Still navigating the complicated emotions that come with ending a 23-year marriage. But I'm doing it. One day at a time. One decision at a time. One small act of reclaiming my life at a time. And if I can do it, so can you. Check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about people who survived betrayal, who fought back, who rebuilt their lives from the ashes of what they lost. Because the truth is, we're everywhere. We're the quiet success stories. The ones who didn't just survive but thrived. The ones who took the worst thing that ever happened to them and turned it into the catalyst for becoming who they were always meant to be. My name is Claire. I'm 46 years old. 3 months ago, my husband had his affair partner deliver divorce papers to me on Thanksgiving in front of my entire family. He expected me to fall apart. Instead, I changed everything. And I'm still standing.